Greetings, everyone. I am, of course, Calibus Rand, and today I got something special for you. Portal Lights. We have an author here who's also doing a podcast, and one of our members is acting in his production. And I spent some time talking with this gentleman, and let me tell you, it blew my mind. And I want to thank you for putting this man on my radar because he helped me and pushed me into a direction that I was needing to be in. And the creative thought processes or the juices just started flowing from that point on. And I was like, we got to get this guy on the show. We have to have him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Bo Luellen as we talk about writing and going into his podcast, which, let me just give you a brief little segue into that. You can find it on Spotify.
Wow.
All right. 3 seasons. And I'm telling you, I listened to the last 3, but now I am going to go back, especially tonight, and start from season 1, episode 1, and just work my way through this because it was very engaging. It held my interest, and that was something that I loved. As you guys know, I love my audio dramas. I love that. So that was something that I was grateful for, something new, something different. I didn't have to put in another Star Wars or Star Trek audio book, and my wife loved it. So that was a plus. So we're going in that bedroom tonight and be like, all right, put the audio book on. Let's go. Let's listen to this. So it's going to be great. But let's first talk about what got you started writing, and let's go all the way up into how did you come up with this great podcast?
Man, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and it's a blast to be on the show with you. I was really had a gift whenever Anne applied for an audition for the show, and during the process, she went over her credentials, and then she delivered an outstanding audition. And the manager of my show and I listened to it, and then we had a panel of 3 judges that are current actors listen to her audition, and we were just like, wow, like this is awesome. Like she's so good. So Anne, I'm blessed, and I hope people recognize you. I hope one day that this show makes you so famous that I have to like make an appointment to talk to you on the phone. I hope that's the way it is.
I'm just excited to be a part of it. I mean, I think we're part of the golden age of audio drama. I never thought radio shows would come back around again, but they say everything old is new again.
So that's a real big deal, right? Like the audio show, the audio drama has reached a point where that, oh my God, I didn't know I could do what I did, right? Like whenever I turned the novels into an audio drama, I was like, I wonder if I could put background music in there. And then Audacity, I just became like a fiend for Audacity, and then sound effects, and then you find free spaces to be able to get those sound pulls. So it's not just a Wilhelm scream that you can get, but like you can get anything. And then I started messing with it so that way I can make monstrous growls, and you're kind of reminded of the way they made Godzilla's roar, where they took a cello and a train and mix the audio together and lengthen it out, change the pitch, and then you had Godzilla's roar. And you're able to make all these custom things to it. And in the audio, you can bring it to life. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, good grief. This was a couple of episodes in, and I was like, I think we got this. And I think we're onto something. And so to answer your question about what got me started in it, I was diagnosed with cancer in 2015, and the doc was like, you've got a version of Crohn's disease that is most likely going to take your life in the next couple of years. And by the way, you've got some platelet problems, which indicates that you have cancer. And I was just like, "Ooh, okay." So I stopped writing D&D campaigns for my group, and I had been doing that since 1996. I started playing D&D in 87, and I sat down and I was just like, I think I need to leave something behind. Like, I think I need to, I've got stories that I've written in my head, and I think I need to put them in a book. And I wrote the worst book ever written by man. And it was about my adventures in paranormal investigating. And then once that piece of warm shit was put on the marketplace, and all the friends that I had said, "Oh, this is great," because they were friends of mine and they're telling me the truth, right? And then I started learning more and more about writing. And by the time I got to book 2 of Magica, it was 2019. It was right before the pandemic, and I took a hard look at what I was writing. I was just like, this is a flaming dumpster. And so I paid a lot of money. I went to a lot of classes. I engaged my intellect into the problem. I learned how to do the 3-act structure. I learned how to do word variety. I learned how to set up a story and deliver it. And I modeled it after each chapter is set up like an old serial, like a Flash Gordon serial, where that you have a character pick up from the cliffhanger from the previous episode, and then you travel along it till you get a cliffhanger. And then I decided not to do just one 3-act structure with one character all the way through the book, but I did 4. So I had 4 characters going at the same time, like Quentin Tarantino, and they each had their own 3-act structure that was going on, and one of them was the bad guy. So you have all these 4 characters, and I set them up to be, each one embodied the fighter, the rogue, the wizard, and the cleric for D&D. And each one had its own alignment. So this was lawful neutral, lawful good, chaotic evil, and neutral evil. And it went all the way through. So that whole first book was just me figuring the hell out what writing was all about. And once I had it down, I went buck wild with the next one, and wrote about 150 more pages than I should have. And then after that, it was a 220 page, every month and a half, 220 page book was getting kicked out. And it just, it got, as we discussed it last night, and I won't bore you with the details again here, but like the pandemic killed my income level and made it to where you couldn't go out and sell your books in person, which is where the independent author makes their real money. And um, I just had to put it down. And then I had an agent pick me up, and they were going to make it into a movie. And I got right through book 1 doing the rewrite, so that way I'm turning it into a script. And I had to turn all public domain references such as Frankenstein, Dracula, into original content, which was good for the series, because I like making original content. And the agent came to me and said, "Look, we can make this deal happen, but you have to put my name as a co-author on the book." And I said, "No." Well, first I went to my manager and I asked John. I was just like, "Here's the offer." And John said, "How much are they offering you?" And I told him. And I said, uh, he said something very wise. He was like, "If that's how they're going to screw you on the first book, the first movie that comes out, what do you think they're going to screw you on the second one? And what's going to be in the fine print?" And I said, "Yeah, giving 50% ownership to someone that's supposed to be an agent, probably not a good idea." So we backpedaled out of that. And then we just didn't, like, it was kind of dead. And then we decided, like, hey, let's try to continue with that idea of make it completely original content. and put it into an audio drama. And I sat on that for a while because I was already 30K down in the project at that point. I'd stopped making money and it was starting to get me in debt. So it's sort of like this. The financial train was rolling through book 1 and 2. I was making great money. And then the pandemic hit and I had reinvested all this money into the project. So I was waiting to see a return on the investment for that large amount of money. And then there was no return on the investment. So it was a loss. So whenever we went into this, we made a deal. We were like, look, man, I'll spend $200 per season for artwork, but that's it. And so everything we do, we've taught ourselves to do. The IMDb credit that we're giving our actors, you got to know how to use IMDb, and it's not easy. So I like taught myself that, so that way I can do what the agents do and give actors credits. The way the distribution works, you have to be so careful. If you have an audio book, like you, Calibus, have a book, if you decided to put it into an audio book, so you use that silky smooth voice of yours and you're flowing it out on the microphone and you read the novel and you're loving it and you're like, now I just need to find a distributor. And you go to Spotify and you sign up for their audiobook deal where the people pay $1.99 to do that. As per the Spotify subtext, when you do that, you give Spotify permission to duplicate, redistribute, in part or in whole, anything that you put up, including taking your voice and adding it to other projects with or without your permission. You give up all licensures to your work and they own the copyright to your work. That's the new deal for Spotify. So the best that you can do with your own published work is to never sign on the dotted line with anybody. If you do make an audio book out of whatever you're doing, put it up on Spotify, but don't do the audio thing. Just throw it up as a podcast. And your voice, if they tried to reproduce you somewhere out there, you can have them take it down because you can show your IMDb creditures and where it was at. Then they have to because they don't want to get sued.
Wow. Yeah, you were opening my eyes to a lot of the ins and outs because when, like I said, I'm going on my 5th year with my first book, and then after we talked, I always dreamed that I would go back and like revise it and come out and get everything correct with it. And when you were like, yeah, that's what you need to do. Start with that. Don't work on your second. You got your second one working, but go back and get that, and then kick that off as your starting point. So I'm just amazed to hear that. But there were so many things, like you said, because when I first started, I was sending so many things off, and then so many people, so many people wouldn't even reply back. And then you would get that one that'd be like, okay, if you change this, I think we can work with it. And I'm like, no, because that's where I want my characters to be. I don't want my characters changed in any way. You know what I mean? I like them being this way. And they, that's it. So, yeah, I get what you're saying.
It's the enticement goes to change your work at every level. Let's take the highest level, shall we? George Lucas, like, despite all the failings that people talk about in his work, he changed our lives. He created the modern mythos. Some people call the Game of Thrones the modern Lord of the Rings. Screw you. You're not looking at it objectively. Star Wars is the modern Lord of the Rings. That's what that is. It's held up despite its wobbly legs. We will hold it up, even if one corner starts to fall. George had a moment of weakness, and he sold his product for $4.4 billion to Disney, right? Maybe he saw too many reviews. Maybe he started listening to like fans nitpicking his work and forgot that if his work wasn't so good, fans wouldn't be so passionate about it to begin with. And that, like, if you went up to even the most cynical fan and George Lucas actually walked up to them, they're not going to tell him to F off. They're going to shake his hand and tell him what a great job he did. And someone forgot to remind George of that before he signed on the dotted line with the mouse. And anytime you let go of your vision, your ownership, or whatever, then you're allowing somebody else to modify it. Now, whether you love what Disney has done with it, whether you hate what Disney has done with it, doesn't matter. Disney has done what they wanted to do with it, and it was not George's vision. George had a manuscript that he handed to him, and they even Iger in his uh, autobiography that I read, he mentioned in there that they chose not to use it. So, Calibus, if someone comes up to you or if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, we want, like in my books, there was an agent that wanted to change Edward Tallman to a black woman. Edward Tallman is an amalgamation of a human and a demon. That human just happened to be a white pasty dude from in a college, and the creature that they made was neither human nor angelic. It was somewhere in between. And I asked the agent, I said, how many Nephilim do you want in the book? Because that's a pretty good, minority demographic to throw in there, like that's, what could be more minority than a half demon, half human? Does it have, why does it need to be a specific gender or a specific color? Give me a storyline reason as to the why this needs to change. If you want it to be a Chinese dude that's middle-aged, great. Give me something to go on here. Like, do you want this story to take place in Chinatown, in San Francisco? Do you want this to take place in Hong Kong? What's the deal? So, like I said, sometimes they just want to be the most fashionable person on the block and have the most diverse cast. But man, I think the term "go woke, go broke" is really hitting Hollywood a whole hard right now. And it's like before we aired, I talked about this. Today, if they were to make Jaws would be a tuna fish and it would be like uh, non-binary tuna fish, and you would forget the lethal nature of a shark. Like, where you find horror is in ordinary things that go wrong, not extraordinary things that become uh, a scary place. It's like some 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 dude is out on a beach having a party with a bunch of other teenagers, and he decides to go swimming with Chrissy Watkins, and that chick swims too far out to a buoy, and she gets attacked by a great white. That's fear. That's scary. You don't need to even see the shark to know that she's in trouble. No one even said the word shark. It could have been any critter that's in the ocean, but it was called Jaws, and that's all we needed to know. That's that's something that I think is just brilliant, the way that they did the movies in the 70s and the 80s. And that's where I draw a lot of my inspiration. There's a lot of 80s in my writing and in what I do. Occasionally I get one of my actors or actresses that will send me a line. I remember I said, jealousy is a stinky cologne. And somebody in one of my lines in my book, and one of my actresses said, that's very close to Police Academy, where the one of the police officers said, jealousy is a stinky perfume. And I was like, oh my God, that's where I got that. And I was hoping somebody would say that at some point. So there's a lot of joy in what I do. And I appreciate you asking that question.
And that's funny because they had a problem with my guy. My villain was a Brit, and they wanted to make an an American woman. I was like,
Why?
no.
Why?
Yeah, I was like, no. I again, like you, Star Wars always stuck out in my mind, and every time I think of villains, I hear a British accent.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
It's just they have that. It's classy and it's calculating and it's cold.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And I thought that would, and they were like, no, you need to change that.
Hmm.
And I was like, no, I'm not
It's
gonna do it. So,
the
but
Roman soldiers also in all the old movies always had a British accent for some reason. So we keyed into the British accent as being the master villains, and so I like that idea. That's old school.
yeah, it's just weird. It's just weird how you said that because that resonated with me right away. Just change it. Why would I change it? And now, and it even with my book, the most powerful character is a woman in my book. Out of all the creation, it's a woman. You know what I mean? But I don't throw it in your face. I don't
Sure.
push it out there. You know what I mean? I let her speak for herself. And I thought that was, and no one had a problem with that. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, we see all that now. And how does that affect your writing now? Now, I mean, we're not in that golden safety net of where you can write that, because you have to be very careful what you write
Right.
and
Yeah.
very careful what
Get
you
canceled.
have your actors and actresses say. You know what I mean?
It's it is my goal to never be political in my books, and never, like, I wrote my books during the pandemic, never once mentioned anything about masks or anything like that in my novels, even though the time frame that they were going on was right in the middle of the pandemic. To me, people get into a book to lose themselves into a fantasy world. I kind of look at my books as an alternate version of Earth, like in the multiverse. And in fact, I state several times in the mythos and the lore that there are many, multiple, infinite, different Earths, and there's different versions, and the gods are one set of gods that overlook all the multiverse, and that's why their mind is unfathomable. So you may have a multiverse where the good guy or the good girl is a different gender or a different person. So all of it is moot. But I don't ever talk politics. If anything, I Jake the Snake DDT hammer on religion. Like, I find religion to be a plaything in my world, because I'll talk about God, the Hebrew God, right along the side Thor, and I've had some uh, messages sent my way. I don't like you talking about Jehovah, right, and in the same breath as Greek god Zeus and Odin and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, so why not? Or I just ignore them. And it's like that concept of open your mind up, and under the overlying theme of my novel is that people can be stirred up into a frenzy over slights, and they can become a group mind, and they can go after their neighbors in an attempt to create safety. So my main hero, there's no heroes and villains in my book. There are people with motivation. So Amanda Lanyon is, if there is to be a hero, she is the hero, but her backstory and who she is not heroic. My characters are Arthurian, so meaning they're archetypes. They're not good, they're not evil. They are an archetype of that personality, and they have growth and change. So they may fight to save the planet, but or fight to destroy the planet, but their motivations are varied. So Amanda Lanyon, she is a theology professor at a Christian college in Tulsa, and she gets wrapped up in this. struggle between a small cult that is very, very evil, that is doing terrorist acts in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and surrounding Oklahoma. And because of those terrorist acts, it's stirring up the 1.7 million charismatic Christians that live in Oklahoma, and they wind up militarizing and starting to patrol the streets to make them safe. And you start seeing what happened in late 1800s in Oklahoma, where if you were considered to be a pagan in some way, you might get treated roughly by the citizens of certain towns. So I kind of built on that. And it became a struggle where that the militarized Christian sect were patrolling the streets and trying to take control of the government of Oklahoma in order to make things safe, like the empire, right? Bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy, you know? And on the other hand, you had the acolytes of Sagmuth, this cult that was just prodding them, right? With little attacks here and there. Little did they know, the person that was in charge of the acolytes of Sagmuth was also the preacher that was, or not preacher, but also the leader of the opposition, the Christian Crusaders that were trying to banish them. And he was just playing them against each other to raise chaos in the world. So Amanda gets mixed up in this, and she winds up having this little mini adventure off in Scotland where that she gets knighted by Morgan Le Fay and becomes a knight of the round. She gains one of the 13 treasures of Britain, which is the mantle of Arthur. It's an actual folklore item. And the wearer, which was Arthur, he used to be invisible when he would wear it, according to folklore. So in Amanda's case, she's invisible to purely supernatural creatures, and she's invulnerable to spells. So she goes through this journey where these pagan creatures, pagan gods like Cernunnos, are favoring her. And she has to morally deal with that and her faith and how that affects it. And she never once renounces God. But what she does do is she opens up her mind to other things. And all the while she's she's a very flawed hero. But I had a customer of mine stop me at a book signing and tell me, whenever I was signing book 2 for this person, and saying what a noble act I had made, pushing a strong, independent woman up to be the hero of the story. And I was like, that's an interesting take, because I don't have a hero of the story. And what makes you think that she's heroic? And she outlined a few things. And I told her, I said, she got her husband killed. And she got her daughters kidnapped by a dark power. And her ideology wouldn't allow her not to act against evil, but that action caused harm to her family, and she's still acting in that way. She feels that she must keep going. She's lawful good, right? And and I said, so why do you venerate her? Like, would you sacrifice your husband and your kids' safety for your ideals? And she said, I'm not sure. I said, that's why she's a hero to you, because you're seeing the potential, but you're not sure what. And I was like, I'm glad that you connected with her, but whenever I wrote her, I didn't have clue one, that she was going to wind up being a female or that she was going to be strong and independent. I just wrote her as I saw her, and then it evolved. If she's strong and independent to you, great. But let's see what you think about her after book 10. And she continues making her character arcs. And she did stay with me. And she stayed with me all through book 10. So I was happy about that. Man, I feel like I'm talking too much. Sai, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I don't want to interrupt you. I'm absorbing everything you were saying. Just taking it all in. It's so much for me. I've had stories on my mind since I was a kid, and I've never really put a lot to paper. Um, the first one I did, I was in elementary school, and it was a little comic book that me and a classmate did.
Tell us about it.
It was just written on regular wide sheet paper, and it was about Earth and military forces on an alien landscape planet. And I drew the little tanks and the little characters. I still have it somewhere, but that was like 35 plus years ago. I don't remember much of a story other than the conflict. There wasn't any dialogue, and that was my first story. And I think I was in maybe second or third grade.
That's outstanding. So you are 46,
I am 43 this year.
43.
Yeah, so I got the little
That's
years off.
so. Do you write novels as well?
Uh, I always start, but then I get scared because I'm like, okay, this is gonna be bad. I don't know anything, and I never ever go past just a little bit. And then I just kept everything in my head, developing other stories, being influenced by manga, anime, everything that I started to expose myself to throughout the years, and trying to read some literature because it was really difficult for me to read certain stories in high school that were really dry. It was really hard, and it wasn't until I think I hurt my back in seventh grade. My sister bought me my first Star Wars novel that I read.
Which one?
Um, Wedge's Rogue Squadron by Michael A. Stackpole, the very first one. She knew how much I love Star Wars. I've loved it since I was little, and I read it. It's like I'm stuck in a couch or a bed for a week, and I read it, and I read it so fast. And then as soon as I could, I went to the bookstore and was so mad that there wasn't another one. And that's when I started reading voraciously, and I started thinking, oh, I love this character, and I love the way it was written. And then I also find a few authors, I'm like, oh, I don't care for this, but is it because it's my taste or because the author is bad? And I didn't want to like, okay, so if I'm gonna be a writer, I don't want to be bad, but I just absolutely loved it.
Sai, I will say that it's impossible to be an artist and be completely in love with your work. It's I just got through making a coat rack for my girlfriend, and I got done with it. And I was just like, that's a piece of shit. That's terrible. That's absolutely garbage. Like, you want to pick it up and toss it across the yard, but she sees it and it's oohs and ahs, and she loves it, and I'm just like, it's 5% off degrees. It's off. I could have done that better. I could have done that better. So at some point, it takes courage to create art. Like, people that, like, I'm an engineer in my real life. And so, like, I figure out logistical problems with managing high capacity orders for the federal government going from different locations, and I get in there and I solve cerebral problems between those locations, and it's boring. Boring, because I cannot invest my creativity into it. Sure, I can come up with a few creative solutions to it. I'm not going to lie, but but creating, like, it's the driest version of creativity in the world. But whenever I put out an episode for the public consumption, like, there's always some degree of sphincter factor that goes in, right?
Mhm.
So, like, when I would publish the first couple of episodes, you could have shoved a lump of coal up my rear end, and in a week it would have been a diamond. Now, whenever I put out an episode, it's like I hit launch and I don't even care anymore. Like, we got a 3-star rating or a 2-star rating on Spotify. It brought our rating down from 5 to like 4.6, 4.7, something like that. And I reminded the fans like, hey, if you haven't rated us, can you rate us? And we got it up to a 4.8. And if that had been the old me, the me that was like when I first started writing in 2016 or 17, I would have never stopped throwing up for an entire hour. I would have been like, somebody took time to ingest my material and they thought I sucked balls. And um, it comes with being a people pleaser. Like, I love making people happy. That's what I DM'd for 20 plus years. And I still DM because I'll write a story and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like they can encounter those orcs. No, not just orcs. Orcs with sticks with scorpions on the ends. Yes. And then, that'll be even more funny. And then, you're just trying to make them happy while challenging them at the same time. You don't want to just hand them victory. You want to make them work for it. So that's where I got my feedback all the time. I had 20 some odd years. One of my actors is Larry Finnell. The other one is John McClane. Both of them have played in my D&D game since the mid 90s, and both of them would drop a Randy Macho Man Savage elbow on me if I told the same story twice in 2 years. Like if I was like, and I was like, okay, so you got to go rescue the dragon. They'd be like, really? They would flip over the table and be like, you did this in 1998 September. Like we've been through this. You're going over it again. And I would have to come up with original stories every week that we played. And if there was plot holes, they would let me know. So it's that kind of prepped me for it. So Cy, when are you publishing your first book?
Yeah, of course you had to ask that question. It's God. You know what? Give me 3 years.
That's too long. That's enough time for you to back
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
Do you know how to create an outline for your book?
I haven't done that since high school.
So get a blank page and put how many chapters you want in it. I always shot for 22. And then on chapter 1, write act 1. About 2 chapters later, write act 2. Then 3 to 2 chapters before the end, write act 3. Act 2 is your longest act. It has your plot point 2, your midpoint, and act 1 is your introduction and inciting incident. And everything inside there, I think everyone here is a fan of Jaws. And up to the point where Chief Brody picks up the red phone in his house. And he's like, what? No, I'll be right down there. Give me about 20 minutes. And he's waking up in his house. At that point, you've met some of your key players, which is him and his wife, his kids. They tell you, like, he wakes up and he was like, oh, has the sun always been shining here? And she was like, no, we bought the house in the fall. And so it let you know that they just moved there. Instead of them waking up and doing the silly thing of like, oh, I'm glad that we're awake now. It's a good that we have this house that we just bought a year ago. No, they did something clever to tell you that they bought the house a year ago, right? So they're new to the island and they reinforce that when they're walking in. And Chief Brody is asking the kid on the beach, he was like, are you an islander? And he was like, no, my parents live here. I just come here in the fall. So now you know that there's this inner community. And when they find the body of Chrissy Watkins, that's the inciting incident. That's the moment whenever Chief knows there's a problem in town. And then you have what's called rising action that starts from there in Act 2. And that's where Chief is like, I'm going to close the beach. And then the mayor catches up. No, you're not. And then the chief starts trying to find out what happened to Chrissy. And then Hooper shows up. And now there's rising action again. And then more people die when he's out on the beach. And you see the Kittner kid get killed. And the dog's name was Peppy. The dog gets killed. And then the woman shows up after they catch the tiger shark, and she slaps him in the face, and that's the midpoint. Right there is the midpoint. They thought they had a solution, but Hooper is like, the bite radius is not the same, hippie. This is not going to work. And then Homegirl comes up, slaps him, and says, you knew that there was a shark in the water, and you let kids go out there anyway. My kid's dead, and I wanted you to know that. That's the midpoint, right in the middle of Act 2. So everything comes crashing down on Brody. He gets drunk at the house. Hooper shows up with a bottle of wine. He fills it all the way to the top, and he's drinking it. And Hooper is cutting the fish. And then it hits Brody. Plot point 2. Let's go down there and take a look at that shark. Let's open it up. And they go down there and they open the shark up, and then they pour milk out of the shark to make it look like guts.
Yeah.
And then he scoots away from it, and he's just like, we got a bigger problem than that, Martin. We got a fish out there with a mouth about that big around. And then they go out to the water, and they find the fisherman's boat with his beheaded corpse out there. And they finally tell the dude, like, hey, man, we've got a big problem, and you better solve it. And then they decide to let everyone out on the beach anyway. Brody knows there's a problem, but he doesn't have the plan yet. Quint's made the offer, but no one's talking to him. So then the movie, in the hero's journey, the hero is Brody. He's afraid of the ocean. He's afraid of the ocean. And he even makes the comment on the boat. He was like, well, it's only an island if you look at it from the water. Anyway, so they decide to go out on the boat. And at that moment, you start getting into pre-climax. That entire Act 3 is them out there. You come down here and chum some of this shit, and they're chumming the water, and you get the dialogue between them. They're setting up a lot of things with, like, you got to watch these knots, Martin. If this thing blows, if this air tank gets jostled around too much, it could blow up. And you see them go through all these things. And Quint is telling the story of the Indianapolis, and you find out his motivation. And then you finally get to the climax, which is the shark leaps up on the boat and kills Quint. And at the same time, Brody takes the air tank, throws it into the mouth, and then sits on the mast and pings him. In the book, I forgot the name of the book. In the book, Brody is the only one to live. Hooper dies. And they kind of set that up in the book because Hooper had an affair with Brody's wife on the island in the novelization. So they were like, we got to kill him. And in this one, they were like, they did some test screenings before the end, and they came up to Spielberg and they were like, so a lot of people really like this character. We need to keep him. And so they did a change. And it's a good change. It's like, when Jaws 2 came out, it was a horrible movie, but it was the highest box office release of that follow-up year of all the movies, and it was terrible. But it was because Jaws was so good, everyone went out to go see Jaws 2. And it's because Jaws' script, Act 1 through Act 3, was tight.
I'll never look at that movie the same after you just told me that. I'm always going to be looking at Hooper like, man.
He was nefarious.
All right. Anne, tell us how you got involved with this.
Well, I've known Bo for a couple of years. We became friends on Facebook because I saw some of his woodwork, and we just started a conversation one time. And I've actually read the first one of the books. He sent me, a PDF copy of the first Magica book, and I really liked it. And I do have a background in radio. My first time through college was radio and television broadcasting and secondary English education and a minor in art. And now I'm a nurse, but I had a lot of fun starving for a while. The movie industry in Shreveport happened when Katrina hit, and all the studios had to move out of New Orleans because New Orleans was flattened. Well, they came up to Shreveport, and I got involved in film acting there. But there's an age range for a female in film acting. If you don't make it big early in your 20s, chances are you're not going to. Because if you look at all your movies, you have your female characters paired up with dudes that are old enough to be their fathers. You don't see middle-aged women in big roles. We're bit parts. And so I kind of put acting on the back shelf, went to nursing school, and read Bo's book. And then also I was doing this podcast, and he put out a call for auditions for season 3 understudy, and then possible lead role in season 4. And I thought, I've thought about voice acting for a while. It's close to radio. It's something I thought I'd kind of like to get into. Yeah, I'll take a chance. And I did it because I thought if I don't take a chance now, I'll never know if I'm going to be good at it or not. And here we are.
And she definitely is.
Can we ask what character you do play? Is that still under wraps?
I don't have a lead role right now. My character's episode has not come out, so I will leave that. I'm actually in season 3, episode 11, and I'll see if you can pick that out, because Calibus, you've been around me long enough at the dojo and on the podcast to know what I sound like.
Well, we're definitely going to be watching it. Listening for it. It's been, such an amazing thing to have all of you guys, meeting people, getting good advice, because, you were always supportive of me at the dojo. And that was one of the things that I loved. You walked.
Yeah, why haven't you come back yet?
I'm getting there. And then when I got to talk with Bo, he was so gracious and giving me information. And, it's a lot of people want to be gatekeepers and hold you back on certain things that you don't know about, or want to kind of hold, I got this, but you'll have to do this, or, I could tell you, but, you need to find this out, and I'm like, well, I'm trying to, if you can just point me in the right direction, I'm pretty sure I can go from there. So this has been just a whirlwind of information, and I'm hoping that it would help not just me but someone else out there, because again, I was always planning on getting back to my book, and I really wanted to go back and revise my first one, because I wrote it kind of like a script. In my mind, this was going to be a graphic novel, and it was just easier, to be honest with you, it was just easier to write it that way. I didn't have to worry about doing anything else, but just put a few descriptive markers in here and let the dialogue flow. And again, getting with you and Bo, and even with Simon, because Simon and I are supposed to be doing this online Star Wars campaign. And I haven't
still playing in that, aren't I?
Yeah, I haven't GM'd in many a year, but I take the planning and I take the storyline seriously. I did the opening crawl for it, and it gets me excited. And I tell Simon about it. He's like, "All right, cool. What do we got? What are we looking at?" So we're working with some good stuff, story-wise, because I do believe I'm a good storyteller. But I know what I like. You know what I mean? I don't want something pushed in your face. I don't want it all politicky, unless it's with the Empire doing something to the galaxy. Then I'm all for it, right? So I just wanted to thank both of you guys for coming on today. I know it's a Sunday, and I am going to get this out as soon as we finish the record. I am going to put it out on Spotify, on YouTube, and all on the Facebook pages. Bo, I cannot thank you enough. And I also want you to know that I've been blasting your stuff on all the pages. I followed it. I sent it out. Because rarely do you get a chance to come in on ground level on something that's actually escalating upward and is good.
Yeah, I appreciate that very, very much. And also, if you ever need a guest spot on your game, like which like for the role playing game that you're playing in, please keep me in the list of possibles to reach out to, and like I'd be honored to play in that game, even if it's a guest spot.
I love that, because I mean, you know what? I'll send you the opening crawl I did for it, That was my whole thing, because I sat down, I watched The Mandalorian, and I kept saying to myself, yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking too. There would be people holding out, remnants holding out. And if I was a warlord and I had my own army, I'm not thinking about going back to the Empire. I'm going to hold my own and maybe create my own thing. And then when they put that on, I was like, I got my story right there.
There you go.
So I was like, boom, that's what I was going to do. And then Simon was like, I've got the books, but I've never done it. And I'm like, you've never GM'd it? He's like, no. And I'm like, I got to get you to GM. I said, but we're not going to do like episodes, the episodes that shall not be named. We're not going to do it like that.
We reviewed last week.
Right? We're gonna do a complete story. We have a middle, beginning, and end. This is how this is going. We're going to confer with each other as GMs, so we know
what's going
where
on,
this story is going, and where it's ending at.
Yeah, that's just that was.
Yeah, it hurt. It hurt. But like you said,
the first season of The Mandalorian reminded me of Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western mixed with Star Wars. Just, I mean, that opening episode, it was just so great, and it made you believe in the product again. And I'll just leave that first season there, as it was awesome. That first season was great.
Look, I'm good. You get to that third season, and that's when I start to falter a little bit, and I'm like, I'm
the Jack Black and Lizzo episode to me was just dreadful.
I said, what is this? And then I had to recant myself, because I was laughing at the Boba Fett fans. I said, hey, my Mandalorian had to come in there and save your series. And then they do it to Mando, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Totally apologize. I was out of pocket. And then at the end of it, I said, you know what? If you leave it here, I'm good. But if you come back with another season and you give me more of this, I'm cutting you off in season 3.
That particular episode that you're talking about, Ann, what pissed me off about it the most wasn't the egregious cameos by Lizzo and Jack Black. Okay, fine. But why were they there was the deal. Like, all the time the episode was going on, every 10 minutes, I was sitting on the couch next to the tribe, and I was just like, why are they there? And then
it would have been so much better if they had just gotten more into the drama of her trying to negotiate with Axe to get her fleet back,
Yes.
Go into Axe and Bo's backstory a little bit more. Get rid of Jack Black and Lizzo.
I didn't understand that at all. I was just like, Bo-Katan sounded like a great backstory that I wanted to get into, and like, let's get that kind of fleshed out. And when they were there and they were going to go find Doc Brown and like try to, get, of course he's going to be the one double crossing you. He's the only named actor in the episode. I mean, who else was there? It's like doing a murder mystery where all 5 of us or 4 of us show up at a murder mystery mansion to have dinner in a murder mystery, and it's just the host and one other person. I'm like, obviously you're the murderer because we just showed up, like.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I saw him, I was like, are you kidding me? Why?
I was waiting for them to make an 88.8 joke somewhere. Like it did not make any sense, and I was just like, and there was like 2 or 3 of those. And I know we're not supposed to, like, I don't want to get negative, but why have Luke effing Skywalker pick up Grogu and disappear with him if you're not going to wind up doing a show about Luke opening the new Jedi Academy and like continuing down that road? For him to hold that little chainmail vest out made of like the armor, and then Yoda's lightsaber next to it and saying, pick one. What? Why is...
You know what happened with that, right? He wasn't even supposed to come back. Mando was supposed to be on his own for a good year and a half before they even came back. But they were like, that's our moneymaker. You can't do that.
Oh.
Yeah, that's where the
He's
toys were
our
coming
moneymaker.
from.
He's our
People
moneymaker.
wanted Baby Yoda toys.
Yep.
They want the stockholder. You got to put that back in there. That's our moneymaker. You can't do that, which messed the story up.
Big time.
And then when Favreau comes out, he goes, it's been a year. The Lucas Group storyline people say, no, it's only been a couple of weeks. What is that? They just keep shooting themselves in the foot with this. They don't want this story to progress as well as it is. And then, of course, they announced the Rey movie. And then they have to recant that a little bit because we're going to give you a Mando movie because things are going so bad for us right now.
Oh, and it's I am energized by the idea of them making a story that has continuity, makes sense, follows rules, and will have a character like we talked about this last night. The Jedi priest, the blind man, Donnie Yang, whenever his storyline with his buddy, I was like, give me a buddy cop movie where these two people are traveling the galaxy solving crimes and like and it doesn't need to be world-ending crimes. It's like somebody's car was stolen, or the deposit for a local shop got robbed and they have to go figure out what happened to it. That would be and Donnie Yen is like counseling to the bad guys, at some point, like, the Force can change your world, and like give us the nature of the religion of the Force and have that. It's Stranger Things. Murray and Winona Ryder in season 4 teaming up to go to Russia was way more fascinating than 50% of everything. At the end of it, I was just like, my hands are knives, my fingers are spears. I was just like, yes. And like Winona, after he performed all those amazing feats and he grew as a character, Winona was just like, get over yourself. And I was like, that's the team I need, have them travel America and solve supernatural crimes together. That's the Fox Mulder and Dana Scully that I would love to read about. And I don't know why, other than you get some idiot producers in there that's like, okay, so we made Jaws 1. What do you think we should do? Let's do Jaws 2, and let's have him say open wide to the shark a second time as it bites into a power cable instead of him shooting it in the mouth to hit the air tanks. It's the same movie over and over again. That's the reason why actors get typecast, because the studio sees them make money as an action star. They don't want them to play anything else. And before you know it, Keanu Reeves is the airhead surfer boy in all of his movies. And it's a sickness. Anne said something earlier about how women that are middle-aged can't find roles next to men that are middle-aged. Kelly McGillis was the love interest of Tom Cruise in the initial Top Gun, right? She was that hot blonde, right? That he was riding around on his motorcycle with. So Top Gun 2 goes to come out, and I'm like, Kelly, let's see her again. And they revealed that Tom Cruise said no, because Kelly had put on some weight. She was looking older, and they wanted to go with the other actress that was in the movie that looked better. And I was like, screw that. Like, why can't he still have a thing for Kelly? Who cares what Kelly looks like? Like, bring that in. Tom is this tall. Everyone's got problems.
That's what I loved about the new Indiana Jones movie and the ending when they brought back the original Marion and they let her age. And I just thought that was beautiful.
Well, that whole exchange that they did, you remember? Right here. Right here. I love that. I love that. I mean, I've loved those two together anyway, even though he was, significantly older.
Yeah.
I love that interaction. They still stay together. We don't have that. They keep showing us this, I guess, social experiment of the internet, because that's all fake. A lot of that, I mean, it's just fake. And they don't give us that hope anymore of finding that true love and staying together. And I mean, shit does get bad, but there is still some good. We all have to strive for that. And that's one of the things that I love about good storytelling is, no, it doesn't have to always end, super heroically. And very few of my characters find happiness. The problem may get solved and everything may be great, but as far as your love life with this other person, 9 times out of 10 in my stories, it don't happen. You had to sacrifice something to make all that right, to make the world right. You can't be here 24/7 and keep that person in danger, or because of the choices.
Happiness is not an external prize to be sought. It's something that comes from within that you bring with you.
That's true too.
There's
it's a choice you make every day when you wake up, and I learned that when I lost my son.
Yeah. It really is. You wake up every morning and you look at the person next to you if you're in a relationship, and you're deciding, am I in love with that person? And you feel it whenever they're making that decision that they're not in love with you anymore, or they feel it when you make that decision. It's movies like Cocoon, where you had a group of old people that had a zest for life again, or The Golden Girls, where you celebrated age, is just not happening now. And Hollywood has lost focus so much that, like Ready Player One, at the end of the game, it was like his prize was he won the girl, and that she was a prize that went along with it. And I would have loved at the end of that movie if she was like, congratulations, you won. Let's see how you do with it. And I'll be watching you, and then she fades off into the background. That would have been a lot more satisfying because she was an idealist.
Yeah. Well, guys, I want to thank you both. I mean, we've hit the hour mark, and I don't want to keep people that much longer, because I know this for me was amazing, though. I'm telling you. I really enjoyed both, really having you. And of course, Ann, you're on our Matriarchs of Fandom. You're also in our Priory of the Phoenix.
Yeah, under a different name, but
but I mean,
under a couple of different names, actually.
And then, of course, there's Sai, our Priory historian, our Star Wars guru of ships and information. Guys, again, thank you very much for being here and exploring this here on Portal Talk. I guess I'm just going to go ahead and do the outro as I always do. May the Force serve you well, light or dark, because this is the way.